Several years ago, I guess probably more than 10 years ago, I was invited to speak at Bible college lectureship where I went to college down at Harding. And so I had a 3-day thing on creative preaching. And one of the cool things is when you're there, you get to introduce, if you're a speaker, you get to introduce the really important people. And so there's this guy named Jack Lewis, and he was quite exceptional because he had 2 PhDs. And this was before it was a cool thing to have more than one doctorate. And these weren't honorary doctorates, ones that nobody really gives credibility. So he had one from Hebrew Union, and that's where the rabbis go. And then the other one from Princeton. And this guy was just super sharp. And he was a little bit older, and some of my Bible professors would say, when Jack Lewis was teaching, if you dropped your pencil on the floor, you lost a whole page of notes. Because the guy it was like drinking out of a fire hydrant, right? So we're in the green room, and I'm supposed to find out how he wants me to introduce him. And so, I'm very, intimidated, and, this guy's just this huge intellectual giant, and just super well known, and so I'm like, doctor, how do you want me to introduce you? He says, you just get up there and tell him, if you don't know who this is, you don't belong in the room. He's like, I don't need an introduction. They're here, blah, blah, blah. But he said it, I know it's the way I'm saying it sounds arrogant, but the way he said it was matter-of-factly. I mean, the guy was just like, he was just brilliant. Have you ever introduced someone way above your status? It's an honor. And today we're looking at John the Baptist. And I drew that last night just in my spare time. We're going to be looking at the story of John the Baptist. This is our second week in the Gospel of John. And there was a time in the history of God's people where the Jewish people, following the law of Moses, doing all the things they were supposed to do, they were extremely, this is really important to set the context of John the Baptist, they were extremely unsatisfied with their station in life. They viewed themselves as privileged children of God. But the Roman Empire, which was taking over the known world, basically was oppressing them. Right? They felt like they should be the ones in control of everything, not the Roman Empire. They're under the thumb of Rome, and they're an occupied people. They're very unhappy. And so when John the Baptist comes on the scene, preaching the way he's preaching, doing the things he's doing, it's hard for us to really conceptualize the absolute excitement that he would have brought to the crowds. I'm not mixing politics with religion, but every 4 years, people get really excited about the presidential election because they believe their representative is going to either keep things the way they want it or bring something in that's missing. Right? You follow what I'm saying here? That doesn't even scratch the surface of how excited these folks would have been, because there was this massive anticipation of the Messiah returning in their lifetime. This conquering king who would take care of Rome by the sword. This guy that would usher in peace and prosperity and put them back in the position of being who they thought they would be. And there were a lot of people, historians tell us, that would spring up across the wilderness and would be self-proposed messiahs, but they weren't. They would flop. They weren't really. And so when John the Baptist comes, they're waiting for the Messiah, which, by the way, Christ is not Jesus' last name. And it's not a swear word either. Jesus Christ. Right? Christ is the Greek word for the Hebrew word Messiah. And in Hebrew, Messiah means anointed. And so there's over 30 examples in the Old Testament of people being anointed, having oil poured on them. They're commissioned for something special. They're recognized as royalty. There's something special that goes on. So Messiah was a small word and a big word. Okay, so it had small implications at times, but the Messiah was a huge concept. And these folks are placing all their hope on the idea that the Messiah is going to come and he's going to make everything right. So someone who has oil poured on their head, they're appointed, they're recognized by God, recognized by everyone around. And so basically think like this: Messiah is God's stamp of approval. Okay? This anointed one. So they're anticipating a spirit-filled, godly deliverer to come and redeem them, establish the kingdom. And so when John comes, he's looking at redemption, but not to be redeemed from the Roman Empire. He's looking at salvation, not to be saved by a conquering army. And he starts preaching in a way that would have been massively offensive to the Jewish people of the day. We call him John the Baptist because why? He was what? Baptizing people. So back up a couple thousand years and think about the Jewish people of the day. They did not baptize to enter into the kingdom. They baptized because they were already members of the kingdom. They had daily baptisms. They had ritual purifications that you did to yourself. You were completely unclothed. You had a prayer. Part of the prayer for men was, "Thank you, God, I'm not a woman."
Wow.
Wow. I can wow. Yeah. But they had this daily prayer, and they would, if they felt they were ritually impure, they would baptize themselves. The only people that Jewish people baptized were Gentiles who wanted to become part of the Jewish faith system. So if John is out there baptizing Jews, that would be offensive. Like, no, you don't baptize a child of Abraham. You baptize these Gentile pagans. What are you trying to say about us, John? This is very, very counterintuitive, and it's very offensive. And remember, we mentioned this before, when John shows up, there's been a 400-year period of silence from God. Right? When Malachi closes down, we're going to look at Malachi 4 in just a minute. When Malachi closes down, until we get the Gospels, until we get John the Baptist and Jesus, 400 years that the people of Israel have not heard from God. So there is a lot of excitement that's being generated by John when he shows up. Here's the part. I think everyone in here is probably pretty much a little bit familiar with John the Baptist. Here's the part that's easy for us to overlook. Think about being John on the banks, massive crowds going out of their way to come and see him. He's in the wilderness. He's living in the wilderness. He shuns society. He lives as a hermit. Obviously, he's called by God as a prophet. Prophet doesn't mean fortune teller. Prophet means speaking on behalf of another. There is some predictive elements, but most of it is just speaking what God has already said or wants to remind people. He's in the wilderness. All these people are showing up. Think about what a temptation it would have been for John to hold on to that influence. Human nature. Now, when I introduced Jack Lewis, I knew nobody wanted to see these people. But that's just in a room of a couple hundred people. Imagine all these massive crowds, all little whispering in your ear. Think of how that would pump up your ego. Think of how that would flatter you. So you got to just stop and think for a moment. What a immense temptation it would have been to hold on to that if you are John the Baptist. Baptist. Not just a name over the door for some people, right? In the Greek, baptize means to dip, plunge, immerse, submerge. Means to go under. There are Greek history books that are written about Julius Caesar's battles, and when the ships are destroyed and they go under, they use the word baptize. We call John the Baptist because he is baptizing these people. And again, remember what I mentioned about Jewish people weren't baptized by other Jewish people, they baptized themselves. John is putting himself through submission to God in a place of authority because he's changing the way the system is done. So instead of you baptize yourself, now he is baptizing you. And instead of you baptize yourself because you're a child of Abraham, John is saying you're a sinner. When you read through the Synoptic Gospels, when the Pharisees come, he's like, you brood of vipers. And he's talking to the crowds. He's like, you people need to straighten up. You're not living righteous lives. You're not following the law. And if you don't straighten up, you know what? God's going to jerk a knot in your tail. It's coming. And you better straighten up. The Jewish people, that's not their style of preaching. That's not their message. That's not their method. The method is, you're great because you're genetically, your lineage is as children of Abraham. You don't really have an obligation for your heart. You just follow these 613 laws, you're good. And John says, no, that's not how it works. So when the Pharisees come, it would have been completely unknown, his method. It would have been completely offensive. All right. So, John chapter 1, verse 19. And this is the testimony of John. So it's a legal term. This is a structured language to really get your attention. Because in case I lose your attention, you follow through this paragraph, John is about to be interrogated. Literally, that's what's happening here. This is the testimony of John. When the Jews sent priests and Levites. So these are people who are, the priests are going to be experts in the rituals that Jewish people would perform. A priest is a go-between, between you and God. So the priests and the Levites. So here they come, experts in the law, the Levitical law, genetically, heritage-wise. They're from the tribe of Levi, which is the only place the high priest can come from. So Levi, and then it has to be someone from Aaron's bloodline to be the high priest. So these are big guns coming out. When the Jews sent the priests and the Levites from Jerusalem, asked him, who are you? Now notice John's redundant language here. John the Baptist. He confessed and did not deny, but confessed. I'm not the Christ. Why would he have to come out of the box like that? Why would he say, I'm not the anointed, I'm not the Messiah, I'm not the Christ? He's not stupid. He can hear the rumors swelling. He can see the power of the preaching over the people. He can see the anticipation. I'm not the Christ. And then they say, well, now remember, this is an interrogation. This isn't a friendly, you know what, you're the new preacher in town, let's take you out for a cup of coffee. We'll go to Denny's. Waffle House is a little rough here. Let's go to Denny's. We'll have a nice breakfast. You know, tell us about your background. Where'd you go to school? You know, what books do you like reading? No. They asked him, what then? Are you Elijah? We'll talk about that in just a moment. He said, I am not. Are you the prophet? He answered, no. So they said to him, who are you? Why? Because we need to give an answer to those who sent us. high priests, the people that run the religious machine back in Jerusalem, are demanding some solid answers because they're afraid of losing their influence and their station and their position. We got to give an answer. What do you say about yourself? He says, well, I am the voice of the one crying out in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord, as the prophet Isaiah said. So, Malachi, the end of the Old Testament, the last book, the last prophetic word from God, over 400 years. Towards the end of Malachi, verse 5, behold, I will send you Elijah, the prophet, before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. The day of the Lord does not mean the end of time. We now look at the day of the Lord as the end of time. At this time in God's history, the day of the Lord meant He's going to do something big. It's not apocalyptic, but wrongs will be righted. Things will. Think of it like a jubilee, like an experience like that. And He will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the land with a decree of utter destruction. So the people are waiting for Elijah. That's why they ask, are you Elijah? John says, no, I'm not. That's the prophet. This isn't me. Although He is. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 11, if you are willing to accept it, Jesus talked about John the Baptist, he is Elijah who is to come. In verse 17:12, chapter 17:12, Jesus says, but I tell you that Elijah has already come. Now, this is after John the Baptist is beheaded, which we don't have that account right now, obviously. He's already come, and they did not recognize him, but they did to him whatever they pleased. So also the Son of Man will certainly suffer at their hands. Whole other story for another time. But John the Baptist gets his head put on a silver platter. Right? Jesus says, well, he was the Elijah, the forerunner, the one who introduces the Messiah to the people. So John the Baptist quotes Isaiah 40. Now, this is written during a time of traumatic disassociation from the land as Jewish people, a humbling time in their life. Isaiah is writing to people really looking for hope. A voice cries, Isaiah 43-5, in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, and make straight in the desert a highway for God. Every valley shall be lifted up, every mountain and hill made low. The uneven ground shall become level, the rough places a plain, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord is spoken. So, in John's day, and for hundreds of years before that, when someone like the emperor, a Caesar, or a king, royalty would come into town, the running joke for a lot of communities are the potholes in the roads. I've seen so many memes on Facebook, like if your city won't fix it, the people are planting trees in them, and I don't know if that's really a tree or not. Or you'll see the meme, here's a Roman road from 4,000 years ago, straight, and then they'll show this one was done last spring, and it's just completely red. In their day, there were people that made straight the way for the king or the emperor. And so it would be a team of engineers, highway engineers. And if there were hills that could be leveled off a little bit so that the king could travel without a lot of stress and strain, if there were low spots in the road, they literally, 6 months before the king came to town, they fixed the road coming into town. So this is a historical phenomenon, but it's also one that's used to prophetically introduce the Messiah. So 600-700 years before John, Isaiah writes that, and then John quotes it. He goes, I am the voice. I am introducing. I will be telling you about the one who is coming. Now, they've been sent from the Pharisees, which is the two leading groups in Judaism, Pharisees and Sadducees. The Sadducees didn't believe in an afterlife. They didn't believe in angels. They didn't believe in miracles, so they were sad, you see. The Pharisees were more, sorry, Chris. I know it's a bad joke. But, the Pharisees were more a conservative, stick to the letter of the law, but they ruled religiously together. So these people are separate from the Pharisees. The Sadducees could care less at this point. They just don't see a threat. The Pharisees do. So they asked him, why then are you baptizing? On what authority are you doing this? Who gives you the right to do this? Why then are you baptizing if you're neither the Christ, nor Elijah, nor the prophet? Now John, you remember, is 6 months older than Jesus, their first cousins. He knows Jesus, but he still, at this point, doesn't know that Jesus is the Messiah. Not yet. I baptize with water, but among you stands one you do not know. He who comes after me, the strap of whose sandal I am not worthy to untie. These things took place in Bethany, across the Jordan, where John was baptizing. So, in the culture of the Jewish people of the day, a slave owned by the household was commanded to do everything that a master asked them. Cook, take care of the crops, clean the house, whatever. They were commanded to do everything except, in the language of the day, was untie the sandals of your master. So a slave has some dignity. I can't make you as a slave culturally. Get down on your hands and knees and untie my shoes for me. Listen, John is saying, I am less dignified. I don't even have the dignity that a slave has. I'm below that rung compared to the one that I'm introducing. So here's John. He abandons societal living. He lives as a hermit. He's dressed like Elijah. He's eating locusts and he's eating wild honey. He's living off the land, trusting God's providence, and he's out there and he's rebuking the people. Plain and simple message. Straighten up. Repent and live a righteous life. Much like North American Christians, John's audience thought they had nothing to repent of. Repenting is for sinners. I'm a child of God. I don't have to turn anything around. I just have to follow the rules, and God will consider me righteous. And very forcefully, unrelenting, very unpolitically correct, John stands there and challenges their very view of religion. And so, the Old Testament prophet Elijah, how did he come to an end? Who remembers? How did he die? He didn't die. He was caught up with the chariots of fire, right? So they're anticipating a living Elijah to come back, and John is dressed just like the way he's described in the Old Testament, like Elijah is. Elijah got in big trouble, right? Jezebel's 450 priests of Baal. Elijah says, you know what? It's not going to rain. It didn't rain for 3 years. Elijah says, all right, let's have a competition. We'll see who the real God is. 450 priests of Baal, they set up their little altar. Hadn't rained in 3 years. They cut themselves, they shout out. Elijah says, maybe he's asleep. Maybe he can't hear you. In the Hebrew it says, maybe he's going to the bathroom. He's relieving himself. They scream all the louder. At the end of the day, Elijah says, okay, I'll call on God. But first, go fill the trough up with water in the middle of a drought. It hasn't rained in 3 years. Water's refreshes. Calls on the name of the Lord. Boom! Fire comes down, licks up the water, consumes the sacrifice. Thus Elijah showing who the true God is. And Jezebel says, May the gods do so unto me if I don't wipe him off the face of the earth. And here's the Jewish people in John's day saying, wow, we got someone that can stand up. We got someone that can hit one of those fences. We got it going on. And he faces the interrogation. You know? Who are you? Who gives you the authority? Why are you doing this? John could have easily said, I'm your redeemer. Look at the influence I have. Go back to Jerusalem. Tell them, the guy's here. I got this. But he doesn't. He confesses. They're territorial, the priests and the Levites. He's not even in Jerusalem. He's across the river. He's not interested in any of that. He doesn't care about their challenges. Basically, as straightforwardly as he can do, he says, I'm just a transitional figure. I'm just making the way straight for the Lord. I'm clearing the path. I'm going to introduce in the midst of all of this massive anticipation of Messiah. And John just says, I'm here to introduce him. Raises a couple of questions for me as I think about John the Baptist. How does this apply to me? How does this apply to us? A couple of the questions for me is, John's clearing a path for the Lord, removing obstacles, making the way straight. Who are some of the people that we come in contact with? Who are some of the people that we interact with? Who are some of the people in our life that have obstacles that need to be removed so that they can see Jesus for more clearly who he is? Now notice, John, listen, this is very, very important. Although people are pressuring John and focusing on John didn't have a Messiah complex. John doesn't feel like, I've got to fix Rome. I've got to fix people. I've got to fix the religious system. So for me, that's a great example. Because I don't have to fix it. 15 years ago, I thought as a minister, I got to fix everything. Everybody's marriage, everybody's rotten kids, everybody's bad habits, whatever. Here I am. I'm your Messiah. But God has a way of humbling us. I don't feel like I have to fix anybody because I've got a lot of work to do right here, you know. And that's what I love about John. There's no Messiah complex here. Oftentimes, all we really have to do is pray for people and introduce them to God and show them our example. It doesn't mean we disconnect. It doesn't mean we neglect. It doesn't mean we abandon people. But there's a balance of what I can do and what I can't do. And John, that's an excellent example there. Not the Messiah. All I have to do is introduce people. So, what are some of the obstacles out there that they have? What are some of the divides that need to be bridged? What are the mountains that need to be brought down? The valleys that need to be lifted up? What are the greatest obstacles to people out there to knowing God? I think it was Friedrich Nietzsche, the nihilist, meaning that nothing matters, nothing exists, nothing is important. I think he's the one who said, I could believe in this Christianity if it weren't for the Christians. I think he's the one who said that. If not, maybe it was Gandhi. One of those two guys. Sometimes we're the obstacle. Sometimes we argue about stupid things. Or translation of the Bible. What people can do, can't do. We kind of get off track. Besides the fact of how sometimes as Christians, treat other Christians. So sometimes we could be the obstacle. But if we follow John's example, we don't have to be responsible to fix everything. We don't have to try to hold on to the influence and the sway and the attention. John constantly is pointing people to the Messiah. And maybe that's the best example that we'll ever have. Also, as I think about John, another question that comes up: how self-aware are you of yourself with your role in the kingdom? John was completely clear, no confusion. I'm just a mouthpiece for what God wants me to say, and I'm just going to introduce people. So how self-aware are you? How accurate are you? How humble are you? How humble am I? I'm not just throwing this out there on you. You brood of vipers. I mean, I'm not just doing that. But these are questions, personal reflection questions that help us mature and grow and come closer to the Lord. And that's what I'm really thankful for John's example here. And then finally, when I think about John the Baptist, I have to ask a very serious question that has huge eternal implications. When I look at John the Baptist, I have to ask myself and us one real simple question that is hugely and vast importance. How serious